What is wrong with chicken, and what proof or scientific evidence do you have to justify your belief that chicken should not be eaten?
Well, I don't think chicken should not be eaten. I think that you shouldn't eat conventionally raised animal foods, chicken or otherwise. I think that organic chicken or beef or whatever it is that you're going to eat, wild-caught fish, as long as it stays under that 10% of calories threshold, which translates to about 2 to 3 times a week, you're going to be healthy. So if we wanted to scare everybody about chicken, and we should scare people about conventionally raised chicken, I mean, just tell people how they raise chickens in these factory farms, and nobody would ever eat this stuff. That doesn't necessarily mean that all chicken is bad. And again, I'm looking at compliance. And I'll give you an example that I think is important. So I have a client in Columbus, had a heart attack and a stent, who adopted this diet about 4 years ago. And it was a difficult transition for this person. He eats animal food once a week, about once a week. Not always, but on average, once a week. And he's been compliant for 4 years. Very low fat, lost 60 pounds. His IQ is higher than his cholesterol. He's not taking those drugs anymore. If the cost of compliance is 1 serving of animal food a week, I mean, we got to stop winning the battle and losing the war. You know, I would put a lot of my very small animal food eating clients and their long-term health up against the 2-week vegan any day. I'll win, as opposed to these people that cycle in and out of these dietary plans. In fact, since I started appearing in movies and writing books, a lot of our members come having tried this a lot of times and it didn't work out so well. And so now we're going to go about this a different way so that it's something you can live with and do in the long term. Now, do they screw up? And they make mistakes. But again, the long term, doing most things right is what we're going for. I always feel like I have to put things in perspective. Yes, no answers sometimes are misleading.
Would you recommend chlorella or spirulina as a part of a whole food plant-based diet?
I don't think they're necessary. You know, again, and this goes to practicality. People usually have some kind of a budget. Occasionally, you find people who it just doesn't matter what anything costs, but most people, even food is part of a budget. And what we want to do is we want to get as much of that budget into mainstream things that benefit everybody. So, you know, look at it from my perspective. I've got a family with 2 adults and 3 children, and we want them all eating a lot of plant food, and it takes effort to go buy and prepare and all that kind of thing. And so where do we want those resources to go? Food. You know, chlorella for 5 people is very expensive every month. If you really, really, really had to have it, well, I'd make a strong case for it, but you don't. So let's spend that money on really high quality food and, again, more sustainable over time.
Does eating cholesterol increase blood cholesterol? And does increased blood cholesterol correlate with increased heart disease? And does high blood cholesterol correlate with higher death rates?
Yes. Yes. And the people who claim otherwise are using very skewed research. All right. And I'll tell you how they did it. It's kind of an interesting story. So there used to be a lot of research on a couple of things, smoking and cholesterol. And after a while, with smoking and cholesterol, not all studies show that smoking increases your risk of cancer, and not all studies show that eating cholesterol raises it, but most do. And so the government actually made a decision a few years ago. They're not going to fund research anymore so much on those issues, because once you get to the place where you're kind of coming up with the same solution all the time, you want to take those scarce resources and allocate them to something you don't know, right? I guess like the alcohol study we talked about earlier, but actually they do try to allocate to things you want to find out about. Well, the Egg Board in particular looked at that as a great opportunity, and they started conducting studies on their own. And how you can skew a study to show that eating cholesterol doesn't matter is you take people who are already eating a high cholesterol diet, and you reach a certain saturation point. Like if you're eating 600 or 700 milligrams of cholesterol a day, you can add a lot more to the diet, and it won't make any difference in your plasma cholesterol. And then you can pronounce to the world eating 3 eggs a day doesn't increase your cholesterol level. So they funded some studies like this, and then they started doing meta-analyses that only involve studies published since they started doing the studies, because you can include in your inclusion criteria only recent studies that cover a particular time span. And so then you can pronounce to the world that eating cholesterol doesn't increase your cholesterol rate. So very fraudulent activity, and people who are parroting this really don't understand what they're talking about, that it doesn't matter. In a dose-dependent manner, even at lower levels of increased plasma cholesterol, you see an increased risk of disease. And I'll tell you something else that should scare people a little bit. It has been observed for a very long time that people who are diagnosed with cancer often have low cholesterol. And so some of the non-scientific crowd out there who jump on any correlation and try to turn it into a story started telling people, see, low cholesterol is bad for you because it can lead to cancer. Well, as it turns out, once you have cancer cells growing in your body, one of their preferred fuels until they build the network of blood vessels needed to increase their glucose intake, because they take in about 18 times the glucose as regular cells, they munch on plasma cholesterol. The more of it you have, the fatter they can get before they build their networks through additional blood vessels to feed them glucose. So that's why their cholesterol levels are low at the time of diagnosis. It's because the cancer cells have been chomping on cholesterol for a good long time. So it's not low cholesterol causes cancer. It's having cancer can result in low cholesterol.
What is the mechanism that causes cholesterol to cause heart disease?
Well, cholesterol is a marker. Plasma cholesterol, nobody dies of cholesterol. Cholesterol is a marker that your body is depositing fat into plaque. It's building plaque in the arteries. And so that's the real thing that causes cancer, is you build these plaques full of all this fatty material, and the cap on the plaque is like a single layer of endothelial cells, very unstable, and the arteries start to narrow. People become dehydrated, and 60% of blood plasma is water. So now the blood is sticky and viscous, trying to push through a narrowed artery. And it's not hard to rupture one of those unstable plaques, and the contents spill into the vessel, and you end up with a clot. That's what causes your heart attack, or if it's in the brain, a stroke. So cholesterol is a marker that bad things are happening. It's a sign.